Anya didn't believe in fairy tales. She believed in rent checks and the brittle feeling of a promise broken. At 26, she managed the kitchen and outreach programs at the local community center, her life a meticulously organized spreadsheet of everyone else's needs. Her flaw wasn't cynicism, it was fear. Abandoned early in mile at a volunteer, then lets it drop when she turns away. Her flaw wasn't cynicism, it was fear. Abandoned early in life. Anya had built her emotional walls out of reinforced concrete. She loved deeply, but only those she could never truly lose. The children at the center, the elderly neighbors who relied on her soup kitchen. Romance was a risk she wouldn't take. It felt like opening the door for someone to walk in, measure her heart, and decide it wasn't worth the trouble. What she longed for wasn't a hero, but simply a moment of weightlessness, a reprieve from the burden of constantly needing to be strong. One chilly evening, after balancing the meager monthly budget, she noticed a large, official-looking envelope slid under the center's door. It was a notice from the city, cold and definitive. The land was being rezoned. The community center had 90 days to vacate. Her foundation, her entire life, was crumbling. Damien Thorne, 38, was a name synonymous with acquisition, not affection. He sat at the pinnacle of finance, his decisions moving markets and reshaping skylines. But his fortress of steel and glass was cold. Damien's flaw was a belief that every human interaction was a transaction. He didn't want connection. He wanted efficiency and control. His wealth wasn't a source of joy. It was a distraction from profound, terrifying loneliness that even the acquisition of entire companies couldn't fill. That night, Damien stared out at the city he owned. He had just signed the papers for a massive urban redevelopment project that included acquiring a small, irritatingly persistent community center. The last piece of the puzzle. It was a cold, necessary business decision. His assistant buzzed. "Sir, the gala for the Children's Hospital is tonight. You RSVP'd." Damien sighed, annoyed by the mandated social charity. Yet, the memory of his own childhood, a brief, brutal experience in a hospital ward, alone, tugged at him. He needed an escape, a distraction from the crushing weight of his empire. He wanted one night where his name meant nothing, where he wasn't a product or a prospect. The universe, it seemed, was about to grant both their flawed wishes, not with magic, but with collision. Anya felt like a trespasser in the gilded hall. She clutched a crumpled copy of the eviction notice, praying to intercept one of the hospital board members. Then she tripped. Her borrowed glass of water arced, but instead of hitting the marble floor, it soaked the crisp white shirt of the most imposing man in the room, Damien Thorne. The silence around them felt instantaneous. Damien, usually volcanic in incompetence, simply stared, his expression unreadable. Anya, her fear of confrontation skyrocketing, started apologizing profusely, scrubbing futilely at the damp stain. "It's fine," Damien said, his voice low and devoid of emotion. "It's just fabric." Anya looked up and saw not the ruthless titan of finance, but a man with a desolate look in his eyes. "It's not fine," she insisted quietly. "It's my fault. I'm so sorry." Her sincerity cut through his usual shield of dismissiveness. To her shock, he dismissed his bodyguards with a slight wave. "I need air," he announced, pulling her by the elbow toward a secluded balcony overlooking the city lights. They stood in silence for a long moment, the wind whipping around them. Anya finally broke the tension, not with a plea about the community center, but with a simple observation. "It's a beautiful view, but it looks lonely from up here." Damien turned to her, genuinely surprised. "You see loneliness in my view?" Anya nodded. "It's too perfect. There are no smudges, no signs of life, just endless lights that don't know you exist." This authentic dialogue, completely outside his corporate realm, was the spark. They talked for hours, not about money or business, but about the things they avoided, fear of abandonment, the burden of expectations, and the difference between having influence and having meaning. The emotional intensity was instantaneous and reckless. Anya saw past the billionaire to the isolated man. Damien saw past the community worker to the soul who understood his terrifying perfection. It was a shared, desperate need for one night of complete, consequence-free vulnerability. They ended up at his penthouse, the ultimate symbol of his isolation. In that vast, cold space, they found a sudden, profound heat. The one-night stand wasn't lust. It was a desperate, tender communion of two people breaking their own rules, seeking confirmation that they were still capable of being seen. Anya woke up before dawn, the crushing realization of her vulnerability hitting her like a wave. She was next to a man who could wipe her entire life off the map, both literally, the community center, and emotionally. She needed to run before he could regret her. She kissed his forehead, a soft, regretful promise, and slipped out, leaving no trace but the faint indentation on the pillow next to him. Anya arrived back at the community center before sunrise, shame and adrenaline fueling her. The night with Damien felt like a magnificent, terrifying fever dream. She immediately immersed herself in work, scrubbing the countertops and sorting donations. Anything to anchor herself back to reality. She decided the night never happened. She would focus entirely on the eviction threat. 2 days later, the real estate agent for the city's redevelopment project arrived. The agent, cold and corporate, laid out the final purchase and evacuation agreement. The community center was condemned. The acquisition was complete. Anya's hands shook as she read the buyer's signature at the bottom of the document. It was a flawless, familiar flourish. Damien Thorne. The emotional stakes instantly skyrocketed. The man she had allowed herself to be utterly vulnerable with. The man who had seen her soul and given her a night of beautiful, reckless escape, was the very person systematically dismantling her life. The one-night stand was instantly reframed not as a shared moment, but as a cruel, premeditated act of corporate betrayal. He knew, Anya whispered, her voice rough. He knew I was fighting for this place, and he still seduced me. Her fear of abandonment morphed into a scorching, justified rage. Anya found Damien's address and bypassed his layers of security, fueled by sheer, desperate fury. She burst into his pristine penthouse office, a jarring sight of worn denim against polished chrome. Damien, immersed in a video conference, looked up, genuinely startled. He immediately ended the call, his composure wavering for the first time. Anya, I was going to call you. Don't, she spat, tossing the eviction notice onto his enormous desk. The paper looked pathetic against the expanse of glass. Don't insult me with pleasantries, Mr. Thorne. Was it a challenge? Did you need to conquer the last piece of opposition? Even in the bedroom? Did the sex feel better knowing you were taking away everything I cared about? Damien stood, his face clouding with a complex emotion that wasn't anger, but a raw, clumsy hurt. You don't understand. This was a deal in motion long before we met. It was business. And what were we? A collateral damage bonus. Anya's voice cracked. You had a choice, Damien. You saw me. You heard my story. And you chose the cold signature over the woman in your bed. Anya turned to leave, her heart shattered, but Damien grabbed her wrist. Wait, just let me explain. There is nothing to explain. You are exactly what I feared, powerful, careless, and ultimately destructive. Damien releases her wrist. His silence speaks louder than any defense. The tension peaks. Anya's trust issues are confirmed. Damien's belief that everything is a transaction is now weaponized against him. She leaves him standing alone in his tower, leaving a trail of pure, stinging resentment. Anya was methodically taping up boxes when a team of construction workers, followed by Damien, walked in. Anya straightened, ready for a final, hopeless fight. Get out, Thorne, she warned, her voice steady despite the tremor in her hands. Damien ignored her, speaking to foreman. No demolition. Absolutely nothing is to be touched. I want the structural engineer's report on my desk by noon. This entire building is being refurbished and made environmentally sound. Anya stared, dumbfounded. What are you doing? This place is condemned. Damien finally turned to her, his guard down, revealing his deep discomfort. I signed the acquisition papers, Anya. Yes, that was the only way to stop the initial developer's project, a massive commercial complex that would have raised this entire block and put up a sterile mall. I bought the entire lot. I completed the transaction. But the unimaginable part is this. I bought it all to save the center. Anya sank onto a milk crate, overwhelmed. But why wouldn't you tell me? Why let me think you were the villain? Damien's shoulders slumped, a rare display of his own vulnerability. Because I don't know how to do things normally, Anya. I know how to buy things, how to acquire and protect assets. You and this center. You're the first thing I wanted to protect with everything I have. But I didn't know how to explain it without sounding like a corporate monster trying to buy affection. I was afraid if I called, you wouldn't listen. The forced proximity of the refurbishment slowly broke the ice. Anya, still wary, had to supervise the workers, and Damien was there constantly, not in a suit, but in jeans, reviewing blueprints and talking to her about the center's real needs. Anya found herself laughing for the first time in days. You're terrible at that. Here, she said, gently wiping the paint from his cheek. The shared intimacy of the gesture spoke volumes. As they worked, they shared small, tender memories. Anya spoke about the older woman who taught her how to bake bread in the center's old oven. Damien spoke about the brutal loneliness of being a young, successful orphan who suddenly inherited an empire but had no one to share his victory with. Damien, authentic dialogue. You accuse me of being a transaction. You were right. My whole life is a series of transactions. But that night, with you, that was the first time I realized I wanted something I couldn't put a price on. And I panicked. I used the only tool I know, money, to try and secure that something. Anya reached out and briefly touched his hand over the blueprints. The anger had melted into profound confusion and the rediscovery of the connection they had shared. She finally saw the truth of his flaw. He was a deeply lonely man attempting to give love to the only language he knew, grand, sweeping, and terribly misguided corporate actions. The grand opening of the newly renovated Anya Community Center arrived, named so by Damien, who refused to attach his own name to it. He stood awkwardly in the corner, watching Anya, who radiated joy as the children and elderly residents streamed in. He wasn't a man of the hour. He was simply a man watching the person he loved thrive. Anya walked over, holding 2 steaming mugs. You know, I asked the architect why you insisted on installing that enormous, industrial-grade bakery oven. Damien shrugged, adjusting his tie. Efficiency, better for scale. No, Anya countered, her eyes soft. He said you specifically requested an oven that reminded you of a grandmother's kitchen, capable of making enough bread for the whole neighborhood. You don't acquire, Damien. You nurture. Anya sets down the mugs and takes his hands. This is the moment they transition from partners in construction to partners in life. I was so angry, Anya admitted, her voice low. I saw your signature, and all my worst fears came true. But you didn't leave a note and a diamond necklace. You left blueprints and a future. You didn't break my heart. You rebuilt my foundation. Damien's control finally snapped. He gently squeezed her hands. I was ready to lose everything. The acquisition, the money, the reputation, just to keep you from hating me. I came back because that one night, that unexpected connection, showed me that all my wealth was meaningless compared to your presence. The unimagined thing I did was realize that I needed you more than I needed control. He produced a small velvet box from his pocket, not with massive corporate diamond, but with a simple, elegant platinum band. Anya, he began, his voice surprisingly shaky. I try to buy you safety, but I can't buy happiness. I can only offer you the commitment of my time, my vulnerability, and whatever small bit of goodness I can nurture with you, right here. Will you let me be the unexpected part of your life forever? Anya didn't need to consider. She saw past the billionaire, past the trauma, and straight to the flawed, redeemed man standing before her. The greatest risk I ever took was letting you in for one night. The greatest reward is letting you stay, she whispered, tears finally falling. But these were tears of profound relief and unexpected love. Yes, Damien. Yes, I will. They kiss, a kiss filled not with reckless passion, but with the quiet promise of stability and shared purpose. Their story became the town's legend. Not about the billionaire who bought a girl, but the lonely man who found unexpected love and used his power to build a life where vulnerability was the greatest asset. The unimagined ending wasn't tragedy, but redemption woven from a single, Terrifying, beautiful night. Have you ever found love or connection where you least expected it? Proving that sometimes the greatest treasures are found only after you risk everything? Let us know your story in the comments.